Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, and this is Cassandra Cain month. We've seen her first steps into heroism, protecting Jim Gordon and confronting her own dad. Now I'm taking issue with the first 6 installments of Batgirl Volume 1, plotted by Scott Peterson and Kelly Puckett, with art by Damian Scott, Robert Campanella, and Jason Wright. Let's start with issue number 1 and see if this kickoff into our own solo series makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. The cover is downright iconic, centered on Cassandra as she swings among the buildings of muted colors, with her grapnel line flailing about. The only criticism I have is that this little tag they gave all the Bat books at the time, it's supposed to be Batman's mask, but the way it's cut off always looked weird to me. But on with the story. A group of G.I. Joe rejects remove their blindfolds to find David Kane setting up a high-speed camera, and instructing the first of them to pick up a knife from the plastic mat and try to cut young Cassandra. They all laugh it off as one declines the use of the blade, but the comedy is soon finished as the girl absolutely wrecks the initial challenger. Jump to present day, where Cass is sparring with a Scream-a-Sticks against Oracle, who manages to get the upper hand when her charge is distracted by the Batgirl photo she was previously gifted. Combat training is done, and Babs wants to get to work on a file for the new Batgirl, but needs to rename the file on her era. Old Batgirl? That's flattering. Let's see. Original Batgirl. Bat Kane would like to have a word with you.
Though unsure how she was acquired, at this time speculated she may have been bought or kidnapped, Cass left David about 9 years prior. As demonstrated by a dandelion, she's just drifted since then. Very clever visualization here. She may only know 10 or so words, but Barb still considers Cass to be highly intelligent, a passage made just as we see she's ready for a kung fu night in the town. We flash back to an alley in maybe Hong Kong, giving what little signage I can see, where a man smacks around another and steals his bottle of booze, stepping on his face for good measure. The brute sees Cassandra watching and is so disturbed by the girl's presence he breaks the bottle so he can threaten her with it. She seems more focused on the victim and the aggressor's facial scars, only to run off, leaving the man to laugh about his victory, only to break down because I think he just realized he wasted that liquor he was coveting.
Oh, it's that first mercenary she smacked down. That's why he's so nervous and jittery. Looks like he lost his shoulder tattoo and got a couple more scars. Good for him!
Cut to present day, I mean night, where a man is telling a woman to not fight it and just relax, which has some horrid implications, but fortunately Batgirl holds him at bay, though he's still trying to coax the woman he's assaulting. That's some grade A delusion right there, made worse by him saying he wouldn't need his hands for what he wants to do. Ugh. But Batman appears to smack him around, and with the help of his seldom credited ally Mr. Brick Wall, he orders the thug to apologize. He does several times, even though the woman he was preying on has since bolted.
I'm sorry. I can't help myself. This is just so beautiful.
During daylight hours, Babs decides to take a sullen Cass out for a walk in the park, telling her that the vigilante thing can be difficult, and she wants to know what the girl is feeling, what she's going through, but of course she can't. She doesn't speak and all that jazz. Later that night, nightmares cause Cass to toss and turn, which is apparently a regular thing. Barbara asks Bats if she's being pushed too quickly. She's only 17 after all. When asked who, out of everyone Oracle knows Cass is reminiscent of, she responds, Batman. Then trust me, she's one strong moment away from making sense of it all. Who she was, who she is.
And one really bad idea away from nothing making any sense at all. I'm not apologizing.
As it happens, Bats has discovered that Kane had tried this form of training before, putting infants in isolation and forcing their brains as language centers to interpret physical movement as a language unto itself. Thus, how Cass knows what people are saying without knowing the words, on top of her combative prowess. Babs sensed as much when they were practicing Eskrima, but given her mentor was an assassin, he never would have taught her. but Bruce did the previous week. Cass picked it up in 5 minutes.
And all she needed was 8 years of continuous and torturous training. You can see the BuzzFeed headline for it now. Karate schools hate him. Dad develops one weird trick to learning any combat technique in mere minutes.
Cass and Bats are sparring in the one abandoned warehouse in Gotham not usurped by a supercriminal. He can tell she's holding back, and so orders her to show him what she can really do. And no sooner does he suggest she's out of shape that he spits up some blood.
Internal bleeding is hilarious.
They hear a noise outside, and we jump to a dead guard beside an armored truck. It looks like Batgirl is kind of just watching while Batman seems to chase down a shadowed figure in the background. In the nearby building, a man is uttering a prayer, one about serenity and courage for change and all that, while putting money in a duffel bag. Note the murk on his jacket when he busts down the door, only for B-Girl to knock his gun away, slam him against the wall, and let him go because she recognizes who he is. Wow, it really is a small world after all. She sees her silhouette, so similar to her boss, and the dead guard for dramatic effect. She then grabs the goon, knocking him around and stepping on his face for good measure. It's when she tells him to shut up that he finally recognizes her too, before being kicked unconscious. Later, Batman basically tells her Gotham is her sandbox to play in, except for costume freaks. Those are off limits. Remember, on those streets, you are me.
Okay, now you're you, I'm me.
I'm me?
Cassie grasps Bat's cheek, probably as thanks for this opportunity, and swings off. The final page sees Cassandra with blood on her face, as David is watching some old home movies with a bottle of vodka in his hand.
I love how this issue did a lot of good work showing Cassandra as a character, an individual, without half-heartedly trying to clumsily exposit her deal. There were great moments of showing rather than telling, and it focused on Cass and not someone else. How novel. And as unlikely as it is she would encounter the same guy 3 times in her life, I think it was okay for the thematics of it all, showing where these two people who encountered each other years ago have come along in their lives, though in varying degrees, of course.
Issue 2's cover sees a sad Batgirl holding up a piece of paper, written in blood, saying, "Please help me not to die."
I'd really like to, but first I need a time machine, and then I need to decide which year to travel to. 2004 to stop Dan Didio from being made IEC, or 2010 to keep him, Jim Lee, and Jeff Johns from holding that paint chip eating contest that led to the Flashpoint reboot.
The first page is a splash, a man named John writing a letter of regret and love to an unnamed someone. It's a very well-written letter that comes into play later. We jump to a man pointing a gun at the reader, like they didn't want us to buy the comic or something, as behind him, a different man is accosting an old girlfriend who's now married to someone else. While it keeps a couple of looky-loos away, John, who happened to be carrying some groceries nearby, tells the pair to call 911, as he puts his food down, grabs a wooden plank, and smacks one of the guard thugs with it. He tells them that with 3 witnesses and cops on the way, the smart thing would be to let the woman go. Instead, the goons hold John at bay, while the lead thug says it would have been smarter to stay out of it, ready to risk 25 to life just to take out an interloper. Worse, he risked Batgirl showing up on the scene and knocking them all out. She hands John his groceries and kisses him on the cheek. Probably a way to show appreciation for his bravery. It's a tad more affectionate than I remember her being, but then again, it's been a while since I've read these. The next afternoon, Babs can tell something is up, but Cass chooses not to elaborate. These 2 panels are pretty hilarious. Her expression seems kind of blank, but at the same time, she seems to be brushing Barbara off just for the fun of it. Miss Gordon, however, points to a vocabulary book suggesting what she can learn so they can talk verbally, but Cass doesn't seem interested.
You know, considering how adept she is at physical movements, the observations, the analyzing of them,
I'm surprised that in all the Bat family, including the all-around knowledgeable Bruce, the hacker extraordinaire Barbara, or the ever-clever Tim Drake, not a single one of them thought to suggest sign language. Sure, they'd need to learn it too, to some degree, but at least it'd be something, right?
Cass gets excited when she recognizes John on a newscast, which is explaining that he was abducted from his apartment that morning. This doesn't sit well with our young heroine, and while Oracle does her information broker thing, she sends her charge to ease some tension by working on a punching bag. The bag did not survive. As it turns out, the man John confronted was a mobster's son, and Oracle tracks their likely location to a steelworks that used to be a prison. But beyond that, they're mum on the details. And Cass is already gone. She takes a cab, but I guess the guy couldn't take her any further than the coastline because she swims to the island and scales its walls. She forces a guard to open a cell door, but the fighter that can see moves before they happen apparently didn't expect him to toss the keys out the barred window. She knocks him out and finds John beaten, a few busted ribs, as indicated by Batgirl poking his chest, and Cassandra starts delivering flying kicks to the wall. Meanwhile, it starts sinking in for John that he's about to die, and he can't even call his wife again.
What really drives this scene home is the expression on John's face, the sadness and devastation he's feeling. It's effective and emotional, and kudos to the creative team for it.
The injured Samaritan blacks out and awakens to a giant hole in the wall, because even concrete is afraid of Batgirl. He blacks out a few more times, seeing her carry him out and leaving him long enough to deal with some guards. He eventually tells her to stop, saying there's no more time, and hands her a letter for his wife as his vision goes dark.
Don't look at me!
John has died, and Batgirl decides to take some aggression out on approaching thugs, including causing a car to drive off a cliff, saving the driver and pulling the mob boss inside out with his own tie before leaving them all to the police. And it's all glorious. Jim Gordon has informed Mrs. Robinson of her husband's death and taking his leave when the grieving widow is abruptly confronted by a young woman in black shoving paper in her face. B-Girl watches as John's final words bring tears and even a comforting smile to his wife's face. The issue closes on Barbara finding Cass asleep at a desk, practicing writing the letter A. And doing it right several times, in fact. I wonder what brought that on.
An emotional tour de force, that's what. I said don't look at me!
Issue 3 touts Batgirl meets Meta, as she grapples with a heavily muscled and face-pierced man. Until now, she didn't know what trouble was.
It actually makes me wonder what's more trouble for a character, a metahuman criminal or a writer that thinks they know how to be meta.
We begin with Bruce reminiscing on the night's events, as blood streams down his legs and there's a huge tear in his suit. A bookkeeper for the Imperiolic Syndicate decided to embezzle funds and hid microfiche copies of his entries in his daughter's teddy bear before he skipped town. Classy. Though the Syndicate didn't know the whereabouts of the evidence, they still abducted the girl because they're evil and that's what they do. Bats figured it'd make sense to take Batgirl along, so he went to the clock tower. It's also that he wanted to check in on Cass after the loss of John Robertson. He suggests that even though the mob boss responsible was arrested, the man's death meant it was a failure, but Barbara warns the Dark Knight not to say that to Cassandra, or he'll never be allowed back in her base again. Cass walks in, suited up, and sensing the tension, but Bats just says it's time to go to work. Later, however, he tells her that in their line of work, they can't fail, even if it seems impossible. They must succeed. But it looks as if Cass doesn't really understand what he's saying.
I don't like the idea of Batman being so cold that he'd call that man dying a failure on Cassandra's part, especially to Cassandra. However, this scene puts it in more of a compassionate context, that he's striving to save everyone despite the odds. It's at the same time admirable and kind of dangerous, given the sort of pressure that puts not only on himself, but an impressionable young ally that clearly looks up to him.
The pair drop in on the syndicate, Batgirl disarming them anime style, which doesn't fit since she's half Chinese, but whatever, and Batman asking the boss where the bookkeeper's daughter is. He's not talking because the Bat is no killer, but he's instructed to take a look at the young lady smacking his goon squad down, and how Bats will trust her not to kill the boss when left alone with her. Seriously, it's so beautiful. The muscular chap from the cover barrels in, looking much more pale for some reason. How very odd. And B-Girl is puzzled when she punches him and doesn't fall down go boom. Batman, recognizing he's a metahuman, knocks him out a window, ordering his newest sidekick to stay away. Finally retrieving the little girl, Bats leaves her in Cassandra's care as he takes on the meta. Like a young child that age would do, the girl says how scared she is and she just wants to go home to her father. As Cass hides her inside a train car, she covers the kid's eyes, similar to how David Kane did with her, while she assembled a handgun. Totally same thing. Batman's fight has spilled into another car in the line, and we see how he lost his emblem. So Batgirl takes the ex-hostage out, seeming to recall her earlier conversation with Bats, and confronting the Bruiser when he busts the door down. After a couple of dazing batarangs, she focuses her strikes on his neck before hitting the back of his head, yet he's still aware enough to grab her and slam her to the ground.
And he's still not the worst base-pierced character to do damage to Cass.
The meta approaches the little girl, but Batgirl springs back up and kicks his neck.
Again and again and again and again and again and again.
He's finally down for the count, and Cassandra falls from exhaustion herself, with Batman commending her on a good job. Later, Bruce is in the Batcave in a fairly good mood as he takes the microfiche out of the teddy bear.
So, a small child whose father skipped town, whose other family we have no information on, does not currently have the one comforting item that could keep her from going full-blown panic. Real smart, world's greatest detective.
I mean, yeah, he wants Alfred to stitch the bear back up, but still. Anyway, the butler leaves, presumably to get medical equipment to patch up his boss before the stuffed animal, when Bruce checks his email. An email he opens despite not knowing who it's from. Again, world's greatest detective. What plays is a video shot with a camera designed to circumvent keyholes, where he sees young Cassandra walk up to a man at a desk and strikes at his throat, much to Bruce's horror.
I really don't like Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League.
The cover of issue 4 features Cassandra, though much younger, wearing a now loose-fitting Batgirl suit and offering the mask up to Batman. Note the shadow. Behind her are film stills of her smiling. There's a lot of good symbolism to be found here. The issue starts with Batgirl launching into battle. Bats narrating over how she wasn't simply good, she was perfect. No need to read the room, simply acting, and whatever fight there was to have was quickly over. Most impressive, however, was that when faced with the scum of the earth, even knowing the Dark Knight would overlook a little extra zeal, she was only as brutal as she needed to be. Almost gentle in a way. He's explaining this to Alfred and reminded he's still bleeding, all for the context of showing the 10-year-old video of a little girl killing a man, unidentified, but not hard to tell what kind of work he does. Alfred thinks that means there's a teenage killer on the loose, but Bruce elucidates that it's Batgirl. Speaking of, she is putting her mask on while Barbara, unaware, speaks to Nightwing about how, after 3 months of living with Cassie, she wishes she could connect with her more, know what's inside her head, and admits that it's kind of hard to care about her otherwise. However, there doesn't seem to be that awkward, they're right behind me, aren't they moment, as Cass is heading out on patrol again, too hard-headed for something like a concussion to keep her down. In the cave, Alfred examines Cassandra's face before the fatal attack. He knows kids, and that is not the look of one that knows they're about to give someone a Bruce Lee tracheotomy. Couple that with Batman not thinking she was capable of killing, it suggested that the video was faked, such as digital retouching like Tim's been able to manage. This puts Bruce's mind at ease, attributing his doubts to the blood loss.
And now we know Tim Drake's dark secret. He uses the Bat computer to make memes. Swinging along the rooftops, Batgirl interrupts some goons shooting at a guy. But hey, no headshots, so maybe they're not so bad? When they're all down for the count, a puckish man emerges from hiding, thanking his rescuer but noticing she doesn't seem to understand him. He taps her forehead, and we get the life-altering moment when Cassandra's brain was rewired. A visual approximation of her brain behind some fighting forms slowly morphing into a single word. Nicely done. The guy figures maybe he might have messed up, but Cass's narration says she's fine.
Who said that?
I haven't heard of captions. Oh, they're trying to turn me into Deadpool. Wasn't Harley Quinn enough, you sick freaks?
Bruce is analyzing the video, noting how digital manipulation mandates reduced video quality. Any rating below 50% means a fake, though it stays at 51. Alfred thinks such a close mark could still be a sign of tampering, but instead Bruce is headed to Macaw, where the video was shot, in order to solve the murder. Elsewhere, the guy Cass rescued says he's had his psychic powers for about a week, and he sort of gave her brain the part that interprets spoken language, though he's not quite sure how, since these abilities are still new to him. She can't really speak, but that can change with practice. He asks if she's mad, doing something like this without asking, but she seems rather enthused, thinking she might have gone her whole life without words ever making sense to her. A bounty hunter appears, telling B-Girl to leave, as she's only after the psychic, and Cassandra charges, only to find she has no idea what her opponent is about to do, and gets knocked down.
In trying to fix one of the character's biggest weaknesses, the guy ended up altering her greatest strength. So, this is what it's like to read a story where characters are written to be complex and compelling. I'd almost forgotten the feeling. I need a moment.
Issue 5's cover sees Batman's profile, Kane's profile, and in between, Batgirl skulking through the sewers with a flashlight. The righteous and the profane, linked by one tragic girl.
Hey, the comic is bringing up that story I hate so much. What? What do you think it meant by the profane?
Our heroine wakes up to a 9mm pressed against her temple, the daylight telling her it's been hours since that assassin knocked her out. The 3 men she subdued have also woken up, polite enough to not just shoot her when they had the chance because she cost them a lot of money. Even at half speed, she can still effectively fight back. She chides her own technique, probably not helped when one of them manages to get a punch in, and after she's knocked the last of them out for the second time, she grabs their tracking device, determined to save the man from last night. Tim Drake, meanwhile, is in his standard messy bedroom, on the phone with Bruce telling him about the professional hit on a numbers guy named Faizul, who died of massive neck trauma while his goons suffered headshots. The autopsy report disappeared a week after filing, and the coroner on record happened to have died the previous year, so Wayne will have to settle for burial records as he flies in a company plane. Tim adds that eyewitnesses claim to have seen a man matching Kane's description with a little girl in a bright red dress. When asked about a possible connection to Batgirl is keeping Bruce from going to Oracle, he hangs up.
Bright red dress? Well, it couldn't have been Cassie then. She was clearly wearing a pink dress. Unless her clothes were so soaked in blood.
Batman is at a graveyard, having already dug up Faizul's coffin, almost hesitant to grab the handle. He opens it up, and we go to the clock tower. Subplot tease! Cassie realizes the tracker is broken, so she takes it to Oracle for repairs. Her narration mentions how Babs tried to fix her, but her bad brain couldn't learn. That feels like kind of a gut punch, blaming herself for something she couldn't control. Barbara seems more interested about her bruises, and since she can't vocalize, she manages to clue her predecessor on her recent change, pointing to various objects as Barb says them. First a chair, then a window, then cellulite in a rather humorous turn. No time to try explaining things, though, and fortunately the tracker just has a loose wire, so Batgirl is out again. After assuring Babs she understands everything she says.
We'll talk.
The sad twist will be in the realization that Cassandra can't stand idle chit-chat with Barbara and would much rather face ruthless mobsters and psycho killers.
Batman has found David Kane, who's just about assassinated that bottle of vodka. I don't know if the drunkenness is why he barely remembers Faizul's name, or the guy was just so low level he didn't matter. The guy's body is too decomposed to analyze after a decade? Who'da thunk? Fortunately, Kane kept the stolen autopsy reports for his scrapbook, but Bats figures he could have faked it like the video. Take away Cassandra's new life, a notion that Kane readily laughs off. He offers the original film out in the open on the floor, which Bruce also thinks could have been faked. David says the reason Cassie ran away after her first kill, why she joined the Bat Crew, wasn't altruism, but guilt. What she did to Faizul made her fall apart. Too young. Too soon. My fault.
Well, would you look at that? David Kane showing emotion, showing that he cares about his daughter. Like, he has a personality, as if he were a character. Dare to compare.
Pointy Ears still suspects he could be lying, and Kane's all, yeah, sure, whatever, get out. But he does give some parting information. On a hit he's too busy/drunk for, and wasn't enough money for Wilson to partake in. He either means Deathstroke or the volleyball. Assassins have converged on Gotham for a $5 million winner-take-all bounty on a lab rat. We join Batgirl after hours of searching, the tracker leading her into the sewers where she finds the Magic Man and the woman that knocked her out. She wants him to do something, but her mind is apparently resistant, which is not the answer she wanted. Cassandra doesn't trust herself to batarang the gun, now that she's not perfect, so she charges her foe, managing to take her gun, but only after she'd gotten a shot off, though fortunately missing by mere inches. As the telepath says the woman wanted some memories erased, Cass might be having a mild panic attack because she almost couldn't save someone. She asks for her brain to be wired back the way it was before, but the guy can't do that, wouldn't even know how. We finally get the guy's surname, Jeffers, when Batman arrives. You two stay close. All hell's about to break loose.
Are Star Wars fans angry and rioting about the next movie not matching their headcanons? No, dozens of assassins are after you. Phew, I was worried there for a moment.
Finally, issue 6, where the cover shows Cassandra being overwhelmed by words surrounding her. Either that or the bright orange gradient. Bats are nocturnal, you know. We open to David Kane playing back his conversation with Bats on his projector, continuing to scoff at his earlier notions. Who else is the girl he raised from birth going to be like? This does raise a few questions, given how Oracle said Cass reminded her of Bruce, and notice how he's dumping the rest of the vodka, bringing into question just how inebriated he was. Anyway, Batgirl is looking at Gotham, a city she's walked every inch of. Come on, some of that had to be gliding. And feeling that now she can identify the names of things, she feels like it changes them, or maybe that she's the one changing.
In this case, for the better. Because some changes can only be for the worst.
She thinks she detects Batman nearby, but doesn't see him, so assumes she's just being jumpy. Except he was totally right there in the shadows, and he goes to check in on Mr. Jeffers as to why he's worth $5 million. He was part of an experiment, sitting in a special chair, taking some pills, good money and room and board, not knowing they were altering his brain. He began hearing voices, like Dr. Johns' thoughts about getting rich as he attempted to cut open Jeffers' skull, and a freak psychic blast allowed him to escape. Bats is confident that no encroaching assassin will get past Batgirl, but the former lab rat says that Ezra, the bounty hunter woman, did. Cass is checking out her bruises, musing about how she can no longer predict movements just as a group of gun-toting goons shows up. She can actually lose a fight. Theoretically. As weapons fire, Jeffers explains he thought he was helping Cass's brain out by altering it, but he can't change it back, so Batman rushes to aid her. She takes a few hits, but isn't sure if she can keep her attacks to disable and not outright kill them. The goons keep getting back up and in each other's way until one of them is shot. She's surprised, possibly horrified by his death, given enough pause for the other two to grab her and threaten information out of her. But anger takes over, and her predicament is short-lived. She slams the shooter against a wall, feeling his heartbeat and delivering a strike to his chest to give him a taste of what he doled out to one of his own. His heart is stopped for 3 seconds before she restarts it and tells him to consider that the next time he pulls a gun.
It's a nice sentiment, given the context, but it might have been more effective if it wasn't inner monologue.
Bats mentions he was concerned that the alterations to her brain would have affected her skills, but those have been more or less alleviated. He hands B-Girl a tracker to find him and Jeffers later, near Robinson Park, which sounds like something you should absolutely say to an assassin within earshot, but tells her to retrieve someone first, and to hold off on any further lessons. In a gated-off building, Dr. Herbert Rutherford Johns is calling his dad for $5 million in exchange for never hearing from him again. I guess being on bad terms is working in his favor, until Batgirl arrives to collect him and takes him to a shack in a clearing among some trees. She susses out that Batman's plan is to force the bounty hunters to stay in the cover while they ambush them. Well, him anyway. He wants her to stay inside with Jeffers and the Doc, and after stopping someone's heart on instinct, he doesn't want any more surprises. Like he never caused anyone to have a cardiac episode or something. Before long, she's watching Batman take on a couple handfuls of goons at once, but she hears more coming from the opposite side. She can tell their guns are loaded with high-caliber ammunition, able to shred right through the shack, so cuts loose to take down most of them. One stands in front of her with a gun trained on her, while another rises to his feet behind her. With little other option, she charges the gunman, taking no less than 4 bullets before taking away his weapon. She falls to the ground as Batman arrives to finish him off. She wakes up in the Batcave, possibly her first time there, and is asked why she took such a suicidal risk. Her answer? Instinct.
And that was the first 6 issues of Batgirl. Why so many? Well, part of it was inspired by the DC Universe streaming site. Someone started a book club discussion thread of these issues, and seeing how closely they weave together, I thought they'd be fitting for this installment of the month. My original idea for this celebration was to review all 73 issues of her entire run. If you thought 6 was hefty, imagine 18 per episode.
I thoroughly endorse and recommend picking up the trades or back issues of Cassie's time as Batgirl. The art isn't without a few minor mistakes here or there, and it can lean toward a more abstract as far as the visuals are concerned, but it works so well for the expressions and Cassie's movements. They manage to convey a lot without needing dialogue to explain it. Even the expository narrations or conversations don't feel forced or unnecessary. There are some details they left out that might have been nice to know, but given the depth and the themes at work, they may not have been necessary. The name of the mob boss isn't overly important in a story about a good Samaritan and the influence he has on Cassandra. And I did mention that maybe Kane was faking his drunkenness to a degree, but I think it just reinforces what I've been saying, that this version of David Kane actually cared about his daughter as more than just a weapon, but as his child. And he was willing to try and fool Batman, seemingly successfully, if he thought he might be able to get her back.
Next week we cross the halfway mark of Cassandra Cain month, as we observe the second dumbest change to this character, her inexplicable turn to evil. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.